Unless you know better, you might not guess Lehua Island is in Hawaii. It's a stunning island, rising more than 700 feet out of the sea. It has fascinating geology, vertical cliffs, an arch in the making, and tidal pools and shelves. It's typically windswept and dry, and seen from the west side of Hawaii, you'd think it's lacking life. It is a noisy, vibrant, active island, nesting and fledging ground for thousands of seabirds, some that are in serious trouble as continued members of our planet's wildlife roster. Until just now, another wild animal, brought here by man, menaced them.
Yeah, so these rats have been here for quite a while, and their impacts are very well documented. We have documentation of them eating the chicks, the eggs of, all baby birds of multiple different species. We don't know exactly when they arrived. The first survey of Lehua was done in the 1930s, and at that time they were documented on the island. We have 17 different species of birds out here, and many of them are impacted by the rats. They also eat the native plants and the seeds of the native plants, and that's been really challenging for the restoration potential of the island. It's a really attractive tree, and it does really well out here, but unfortunately a lot of these seeds get chewed up and eaten by rats.
The seabirds perched at the top of the island's natural food web and systems, and the small rats who've done their best to wipe them out. This is the story of the many people involved in the Lehua project, a $1 million+ effort to restore this incredible island to perhaps one of the last places on Earth capable of being the nesting and birthing home to thousands of native Hawaiian birds. You're getting an up-close look at what it's taking to restore Lehua Island as a tropical bird paradise.
E o umau ka mai, ka pō mai, e nana ia mai ka wahi pana o mākou, mai ka hikihi a ka hikihi, mai ka u ka ake kai. As a cultural practitioner, it's very important to me that these birds, that we keep them alive as long as possible. To me, they are so important. They are so important to our culture. We hold birds in very high regard. E kalama kahikina, kahiki mai aloha kupunae, kukahalia kalia vaikini. Birds can do things we can't do. And they say immediately, they can fly. I said, yes. I think sometime I'd like to come back as a bird. I'd like to fly like they do. I think maybe in the past I might have been one. But they can fly, they can search for fish, they can spot the fish, they can tell us that those fish are there. And to this day, our fishermen follow the birds to see where the schools of fish are. So birds in Hawaiian culture are extremely important.
This is why a large group of government agencies, world-renowned conservation groups, numerous Native Hawaiian organizations and individuals, the owners of nearby Ni'ihau, and many others joined in the Lehua Restoration Project Steering Committee.
So I hope that people believe that we did do our homework, that we did do a lot of research, and we followed best management practices that were very tried and true, bringing in the world's experts with island conservation.
Sherry Mann, branch manager for the state's Division of Forestry and Wildlife on Kauai, was one of 2 incident commanders during the mid-2017 drop of poison-laden pellets on Lehua Island intended to rid its slopes of invasive Pacific rats once and for all. She discusses the enormous collaboration that led to the plan, the permits, and the execution of 3 aerial applications of rodenticide in late August and early September.
We had a suite of partners, including Fish and Wildlife Service, USDA. We had the owners of had multiple divisions within the Department of Land and Natural Resources. We had the National Tropical Botanical Garden and others. So this was a very collaborative, well thought out project that was, that we put a lot of time, over a year before we actually deployed the product.
Flashback to 2009, the first try at getting rats off the Lehua Island. An altogether different project than the recent one, also attempted to eradicate the predators. Poison did take care of a lot of them, but some survived and repopulated the island.
First rat poison drop back in 2009 was an absolute disaster. It just wasn't done right.
The other thing is I want to reinforce our rules.
The team hired by the state to lead the 2017 Lehua eradication project is Island Conservation.
If you want to be in, you have to ask permission, and you have to get permission from Tommy.
They've done this kind of work on dozens of islands around the world with a very successful track record.
Pilot's ready to go?
When we found out that there was going to be another rat poison drop, I suggested to my brother, the first one we were not involved with, and they had to carry everything from Kauai without staging on Lehua. And the second time around, I said to my brother, we better get involved and try to see if we can steer this thing in a saner direction the second time around. And so we got involved and made some suggestions, and this is a different outfit doing this work than the first outfit was that made the first drop. And this outfit listened to us, and it made three basic changes that we considered important. One, it dropped in the summer instead of the winter, when everything's dry and the rats are stressed for food. Second, they did not drop in front of just ahead of the biggest rainstorm in the winter. And third, they did not drop in a high wind. All of which were three mistakes made on the first drop.
The people of Niihau, since their island is less than a mile across the channel from Lehua Island, perhaps have the largest stake in what happens. Not only were they extremely supportive of the 2017 project, island owners Keith and Bruce Robinson allowed Niihau to be used as the command post for the aerial spreading of bait. A team of Niihauans were hired and trained to handle the bait and get it into the chopper's hopper.
There were originally both rabbits and rats on Lehua. The rabbits appeared to be evolving into some kind of a super breed. The rabbits appeared to be not only able to eat vegetation, but they also were developing specialized claws, big claws for digging burrows in the soft volcanic dirt. And they also appeared to be adapting to eating seabird eggs for moisture in a drought. Once those rabbits were eradicated, which occurred successfully prior to 2009, the seabird population increased so much that about 2 years ago, my brother had to give orders to our Niihau helicopter to stay away from Lehua Island due to the possibility of bird strikes, which are very, very dangerous to a helicopter. So already the poisoning of the rabbits appears to have had an effect, and the bird population is increasing. What will happen as a result of this, I don't know, but I would not be surprised at all if the bird population takes a big jump after this.
That's the goal. Coming up next, the well-planned, well-choreographed, highly regulated aerial applications as Lehua Island, restoration of a tropical bird paradise, continues. Restoring Lehua Island to its natural state as a tropical bird paradise is a tall order because of these tiny, voracious rats.
We have to get them all. And the reason we have to get them all is that they are very prolific little creatures. So if we leave as much as one pregnant female, they have a very, very good ability to just bounce right back and repopulate the island.
Our primary landing pad is right here where it normally is.
That's why years of planning went into the 2017 aerial application of a rodenticide-laced bait aimed at clearing rats from Lehua permanently and totally.
For empty bags are those right there. Our bait loading platform is set.
We understand that projects like this have inherent risks, so we very much respect the public concern over risks, and we acknowledge that there is some risk that we're trying to minimize as much as we can with how we proceed with the operation and how we work our strategy to achieve the end goal.
Two years ago, the partners of the Lehua Island Restoration Steering Committee conducted a trial drop of bait.
So today's kind of a trial run. This is a chance for us to fly some helicopters out to Lehua Islet, and we are dropping a non-toxic bait onto the island. It's the same formulation that you would use in a rodent control project, except that it doesn't mix at all. So it's just cereal basically and a little bit of dye that lets us track where the bait is going on the island.
Test plots help the team understand how to safely spread the rat bait and try and minimize any unintended impacts to land and sea creatures besides the rats. Over the course of many months, steering committee leaders held public meetings to explain their plans, answered dozens of media inquiries, and tried to dispel misinformation that often spread across social media.
You hear 10 tons of poison being dropped on this little island. It sounds horrible. You feel like the whole place is going to be covered with Roundup and be forever killed. And so what I like to say is that using this particular rodenticide, as we call it, or rat killer, it's using a blood thinner. It's using a drug that's very much like Coumadin, the drug that people take for eliminating or preventing blood clots. Millions of people take Coumadin. So it isn't about the actual chemical itself being poisonous. It's about the fact that rats are particularly susceptible to it. They're particularly sensitive to this chemical called difascinone. So I brought this just to show you. So also what's being dropped, the 10 tons of cereal grain that's being dropped, includes about this much of the difascinone, or the blood thinner.
Hob Osterlin is the founder of the Kauai Albatross Network and a conservation author who notes how quickly false information spread across the Garden Island.
Then all of those details get lost in the conversation, because shouting matches, you don't get to actually find key details like that. But a steering committee met, looked at all of the possibilities, applied for all the correct permits. This is not anybody doing an end run around the environmental protection laws. This is actually the most proven way of doing this. There isn't a better way to do it.
Lehua is a high island, which means it probably won't be impacted by rising seas.
I tend to look at it from a long-term perspective. I think we need to worry about losing some of the Northwest Hawaiian Islands and the birds and snails and other organisms that are endemic to those areas and thrive out there. When the ocean levels, if they continue to rise, those islands will be lost. And we have to work on it now. We have to turn Lehua into a functioning native ecosystem to provide a sanctuary for the birds and the other animals that are up in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands that we really have nowhere else to go.
August 22nd, one day before the first scheduled drop of the bait containing tiny amounts of rodenticide. It'll be a busy day for the Lehua Island Restoration Team, who've been camping here off and on for weeks to prepare. Under a tent to protect them from the unrelenting sun, they put tiny radio tracking collars on 24 rats they'd trapped earlier.
Adult male, 36 grams.
Then off to the field, where the collared rats are released in the exact spots where they were trapped.
We are releasing these radio-collared rats in order to track them across the island and to see how they respond, how quickly they respond to the toxic bait pellets.
Under the watchful eyes of adult red-footed boobies, their chicks and juveniles, each rat scurries into the grass.
There are people who are opposed to this who also would love to see it fail. There are people who would love to say, see, I told you it failed. And that can happen just by a rat or two being left on this whole controversy. So to me, the people that are interested in protecting our Hawaiian native critters want this to succeed.
And to a person, the dozens of people who've worked hour after hour, day after day, often for years at a time, preparing for what's about to happen.
Roger that. Talk to you in an hour.
One hour before sunrise on August 23rd. The team on Lehua Island begins making hourly weather observations. The choppers won't fly and won't drop bait if the winds are too strong or if rain is forecast.
Then kind of level.
It looks pretty level.
Pull it up about 2 inches.
Yeah, right about there. Roger.
A sign goes up to alert boaters that helicopters will be flying bait buckets across the channel. The Coast Guard has already issued a mariner's alert. Everything needs to go perfectly, just as planned, in order to achieve the end goal, which bears repeating.
I really do understand the fear factor. It doesn't sound like a nice thing to drop. People were talking about tons of bait, and it wasn't actually tons. It wasn't tons of poison, it was tons of bait. So there's a genuine fear, but unfortunately there's a lot of misinformation out there, and that just amplified the fear. And if people understood the facts, firstly the threat, because most people don't come out here. I mean, we're fortunate enough to be out here watching that little wedge-tailed chick flapping his wings. You know, people don't come out here so they don't know what the island's like.
Communicating by radio between Lehua and Niihau, where the bait is loaded, the first chopper gets a green light. Crisscrossing Lehua in roughly parallel lines, the plan is to spread enough of the pencil eraser-sized bait over as much ground as possible to ensure 100% exposure.
So are these guys, who are these guys again?
Division of Aquatic Resources.
Oh, Star.
Yeah.
Agency and independent monitors are on boats watching for any potential impacts to aquatic life. On the shore, the restoration team continues hourly weather checks and helps serve as eyes and ears for incident commanders over on Niihau.
It's really exciting to see it finally all coming together. It's been many years of planning, and it's been a long road to get here. It's been quite a roller coaster ride with a lot of challenges along the way, but it's good to see that this is happening and that the restoration of the island has really begun.
It'll be a year before anyone can say with complete certainty that Lehua Island is rat-free. "19 days later, on September 12th, a helicopter sweeps in over Niihau, ferrying team members in for the third and final bait drop. They're greeted by Keith Robinson, who, as you heard earlier, did a 180 in his thinking between the failed 2009 attempt and this one.
It was very, very thorough planning. And originally, I had jumped to the conclusion after the 2009 bait drop that it was a sloppy bait drop and that it was the poison that caused the fish kill. But I had to revise my opinions after I did a lot of in-depth studying.
So we're here to do our third and last drop on Lehua, and I am very excited that we are on the last run here. So I just want to make sure to touch base on a few things that are very important. PPE is long pants, long sleeve shirts, shoes, socks. We have a very in-depth operational plan that we follow very closely. We have an incident command structure, as you pointed out, so we have very clear hierarchy of in roles that every single person play, and they know those roles and they understand the roles that they play. So there is very careful planning and implementation of the operation that follows a number of requirements on a number of permits that are required for us to perform this operations.
On this last day, there's praise for the exactitude and professionalism of the entire operation, and particularly for the residents of Niihau, who were hired and trained to be part of the operations team, handling the bait bags, pouring them into the hopper, and making sure time after time that each load gets safely off the ground and onto Lehua.
Okay, I was telling you guys this is a
I've done a lot of these islands, and this is by far the cleanest loading station I've ever seen. I mean, not one drop of bait has hit the ground, and that's a real compliment to you guys, because there's a lot going on with the wind, and it's just a lot of chaos.
Following the second bait drop, social media posting showed 44 dead fish and 2 birds, alleging connections to the project. As of this broadcast, results aren't in, but due to the condition of fish sent to the laboratory, we may never know what killed them. Laboratory studies suggested low to no risks to local fish species. From the outset, steering committee members repeated this often.
What guides us is for every project that we work on, what we look at is if the long-term benefits outweighs those risks. There's always risks with everything that we do. Based on the best available science that we are aware of and that we have worked from, we believe that if there's any potential short-term risks, they are by far outweighed by the potential benefits to the seabird colony. Lehua is a very important seabird colony in the Hawaiian Islands.
We again visit Lehua Island 2 weeks after the final drop. Coming up, are the rats gone? And what's ahead for Lehua Island? Restoration of a tropical bird paradise.
Yeah, this is a little wedge-tail condo here.
More than ever, Lehua Island is going to the birds, and possibly not to the degree seen since rats somehow got to this deceptively barren-looking island decades ago. During recent efforts to rid Lehua of rats and to restore its place in conservation as a tropical bird paradise, Dean Foster of the United States Department of Agriculture's National Wildlife Research Center spent days here. He was one of the independent observers required by permit to be here to watch for and report back on any negative impacts to what project planners called non-target species. In other words, marine mammals, fish, any creatures other than rats.
And in that role, we're looking at the entire operation to make sure they met their targets on baiting, and also to monitor the environment for any residue from the bait. It's actually it's quite impressive because in the evenings and also in the mornings you would see rats crawling around all over the place. And since the first day of the first drop, there's just no more rats. And there's so many birds now, just imagine how many more birds there's going to be after all the rats are gone.
17 different seabird species already nest on Lehua. If the rats are indeed gone, it's expected other birds that once nested and raised their chicks here will return and add to the remarkable palette of life possible on this remote protected island.
Oh, my hope for Lehua is that some of these native seabirds have a safe place. Safe places are so hard for seabirds to come by. Any native birds, the water birds have an equally bad problem, but the seabirds have almost nowhere they can go. We're talking about albatross, we're talking about petrels, we're talking about boobies. All these kinds of birds have nowhere to go unless we protect them from the predators that we brought. So that means rats, dogs, and cats, basically pigs as well. So Lehua has only one of those predators, and that's the rat. We want to get rid of them so those birds can nest there and successfully raise their babies and have a safe place away from the evils we brought to them.
Oh, I've got a wedge-tail here.
2 weeks after the conclusion of 3 aerial drops of pellets containing minute amounts of rodenticide, a team from the Kauai Endangered Seabird Recovery Project is here to check their plots.
And what we have is a series of seabird plots on the island, so they're spread out all across the island. We have 75 seabird plots in total in every single point, and they're randomly situated on the island. And what we do is we count all the seabirds within the plot itself. And now that we've had the rat eradication project underway, it'll be really interesting to see how the birds respond to the fact there are no rats here.
For 5 years now, Dr. Andre Rain and his crew have conducted regular counts of birds on Lehua. They are among the many experts who believe that with the rats gone, this seabird colony will grow and thrive.
I'm not one for, you know, spreading poisons willy-nilly, but this is a time where this was appropriate use of that. You know, I'm looking forward to a time when this is, you know, back up to breeding capacity, and, you know, to see the birds in their numbers.
No rats, more plants, a restored tropical bird paradise.
When the Aina part of Lehua is restored, then there'll be less erosion. The plants will hold the soil down. It'll create ecosystems for other organisms like native insects and such. And then, of course, the birds will be a major benefactor to all that.
Everything up to this point is for the birds. Lehua Island is a prime example of the possibility of an uninterrupted circle of life. And what a place like this can tell us, we who are ultimately responsible for what happens, good and bad, on the planet we share with so many other creatures.
These birds have been here long before humans have, and this is their rightful home. So we have a duty of care to make sure that they are here in the numbers that they should be in, and protect them.
With continued luck, care, and stewardship, Lehua Island now on its way to becoming a true tropical bird paradise.
It needs to be restored. We as humans took the rats over there. We as humans took the rabbits over there. And you know, no one here today is to blame for the destruction and all that those animals have done. But I personally take it as a kuleana responsibility of my own.